Sahana vavatu Sahano bhunaktu Sahaviryam karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So from today on, we will be chanting only about 3 of the Dhyana shlokas. And I'm going to put that up now. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavatam Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshinim Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajwalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetam Vrudatuhe Namaha. Sarvopanishado Gavaha Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Moksha Ishyami Ma Shuchaha. So welcome to everyone for almost the last class of 2020. We have finished so far 4 sessions, and today is the 5th session of Bhagavad Gita. So today is the start of the very first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So far, we saw in the last 4 lectures, first an introduction to Bhagavad Gita as to why we need to study Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, of course, was given 5,000 years ago, but the universality of this teaching is relevant even today. So we saw that. And then we spent the next 3 sessions really paying our gratitude to this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. We also offered our gratitude to Sri Vedavyasa Ji for giving us this great Mahabharata, and in the middle of the Mahabharata, giving the essence of Bhagavad Gita. We spoke about the glory of Mahabharata, and finally, we prayed to Lord Krishna and the supreme reality, Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutaha Stunvanti Divyai Stavaihi Vedai Sangapada Kramopanishadaihi. So we paid homage to that Bhagavan, Lord Krishna, and the supreme reality. So we're now entering into the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. The first chapter is really in the form of this problem statement, as we said, and the second to the 18th chapter is the solution to the problem. And this solution is in the form of a dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna. So what exactly do we mean by this problem statement? Obviously, for every solution, we have to clearly define our problem. And this problem has to be of such a nature that it has to be applicable to anybody at any time under any conditions. That's how a solution can withstand the test of time and any other variables that we can think of. So what is this problem statement? This problem statement is literally not knowing my true nature, really not understanding that I am not this limited body, mind, and intellect. So if I don't know this, what happens? Well, this leads to what we call this as an attachment. And this attachment is born out of having a false identity. So when this false identity or the ego or this aspect of I think myself to be body, mind, and intellect, then there is a sense of ego, which the very first thing that this ego does, it looks for where do I get myself attached to? And what is it that is close to this ego? Well, all these layers which we are endowed with in sufficient measure, right? It is our body, our mind, and intellect. So let us think about this attachment. This attachment is something that we all know it. We all are attached to something or the other. It doesn't matter who, whether it is an ant to all the way to the best of human beings in the sense of a varied level of attachment. So it could be an attachment to something related to our body, something related to, when I say body, it could be anything physical, any of the objects. It could be my, wanting to change my computer all the time or my phone all the time, or wanting something, which is attractive, whether it's clothing, whether it's a house, whether it is anything on a physical level. Or it could be even at a mental level on being emotionally attached to whether it's relationships, or it could be even the most beautiful sunset or the sunrise, anything. All that can be construed as an attachment. Or if none of these, I could be attached to my dog, right? So all these are what we call as attachments. This is where the ego likes to attach itself. When I say ego, let us clearly understand it is not the false, it is not the bloated ego or the ego that I'm so smart or I'm so good, I'm so great, or oh, I'm not that good. No, we are not talking about that. What we are talking about is the sense of identity, the sense of who I am. So this is the attachment we are talking about. In very simple sense, it is I and I want. So I plus I want, having this kind of feeling towards anything in the world or being is called as attachment. And when this attachment becomes stronger, then that leads to a lot of the so-called negative tendencies like fear, hate, jealousy, envy, depression, many kind of mental health issues. All these is because of the sense of an attachment. And this fundamental problem is the one that Vedavyasa ji, with his Vishala Buddhe, was able to bring about in this big canvas of Mahabharata, where you had the Kauravas, who are 100 in them, 100 in number, and who represents literally the negative tendencies, all this negative tendency that I talked about, in a very level of an extreme measure. And you had the Pandavas on the other side, who represent really the divine tendencies within us, who also represent those tendencies which helps us to negate all the other negative tendencies. It helps us in a way to vanquish all the other negative tendencies. So within ourselves, there is this constant Mahabharata war, which is waged in every moment of our lives. It is actually because of this negative forces which are born of attachment that leads to or blocks the sense of goodness in us, which really makes us weak in our efficiency. So the Kauravas, representing these negative tendencies, are born in this Mahabharata war, in the Mahabharata which I mentioned, as children to this old king Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra was born as a blind prince. And the commentaries that I've read, some of them mention about how this is a representative of a kind of a delusory blindness to that ultimate truth, which allows me to know that who I am. So that blindness itself is a representative of the delusion born out of ignorance, which blinds this truth. And this allows him, he was not just physically blind, but he was also mentally blind and intellectually blind to all the negative tendencies of his children. So much so that he lost even the sense of who he was and what he should be doing as a true king. So, how do we get out of this Mahabharata war? How do we understand truly my nature? And this is where we find that if I have, from a very simplistic sense to the highest level of devotion, where I can have a friend like Lord Krishna in my life, then I can actually see a way to get out of this quagmire, if you will, of getting out of this negative tendencies and move towards a divine nature within myself. So the Gita fittingly starts with looking at Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra, who is physically blind, intellectually blind also, and so all this blindness kind of rule him out really to be the king, but yet we find that because of his delusion, he holds on to the power, and because of the power, we see that the conflict which has arisen with the Pandavas and Kauravas leads to this inevitable war, and the war is about to start. And that's when that leads to the very first shloka of the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So friends, I might be going a little fast today because in the first chapter, like I said, we are trying to define the problem. And the problem is this sense of an insecurity, as I call it, because I am not secure in the knowledge that I am this infinite nature. We take ourselves to be something else, and that leads to a lot of insecurities in understanding this aspect. And in this form of insecurity is this whole aspect of attachment, which we defined just now, and how this attachment leads to a lot of confusions and emotions. And that is what we are going to be seeing in the next few shlokas of the first chapter. So let us chant this first shloka. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Dhritarashtra Uvacha. Dhritarashtra Uvacha. Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre. Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre. Samaveta Yuyutsavaha. Samaveta Yuyutsavaha. Mamakah Pandavaschaiva. Mamakah Pandavaschaiva. Kimakurvata Sanjaya. Kimakurvata Sanjaya. Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre. Samaveta Yuyutsavaha. Mamaka Pandavaschaiva. Kimakurvata Sanjaya. So let us look at the word meaning first. Dhritarashtra Uvacha. So Dhritarashtra is the name of the king, of that old king, and he is questioning or asking Sanjaya, who is his, you can call him a secretary or an assistant or his personal assistant, and we will discuss about a little bit on the characters themselves. So he's asking Sanjaya, in this Kurukshetra, in this place where the war is being held, Kurukshetra, where everybody has been assembled, Samaveta, assembled, Yuyutsavaha, to fight this battle in order to perform their responsibilities or their duties, if you will, which is referred to as Dharma Kshetre. So who they assembled to do their dharma, they are fighting here. In this case, so Mamaka Pandavaschaiva. So who are they who have arrayed here? So they are my people, Mamakaha, my people, and Pandavas, Pandavaha cha eva, Pandavaschaiva, Kimakurvata Sanjaya. What did they do? Kima akurvata Sanjaya. So this is the question that Dhritarashtra is posing to Sanjaya. Interestingly, this is the one and only shloka in all of the 701 shlokas of Mahabharata that Dhritarashtra has spoken. But even though it's just one, there are so much we can interpret from the words that are used and how they are said it. Sounds like a very simple shloka, but we will look into it a little more carefully. So before the Gita started, as we said, we know the story of Pandavas and Kauravas. They all are getting ready for the battle. And the king, who is so attached to his sons, even though, they are quite vicious and treacherous, he is sitting in his palace and he would love to know what is going on in the battle. So we have Vedavyasa who asks him, would you like to have just a one-time deal? One time, I can give you a virtual television, all you have to do is I'll give you the site and you can actually see what is happening at the war front. Duryodhana thinks about it and he says, well, I don't know. You see, he is so attached to his children and he knows that what Duryodhana did was not right. And he also knows his other sons, Dushasana and others, they also did not really do the right thing. And he almost knows what the outcome is going to be. And he doesn't want to see it. He's afraid to see what will happen. So he tells Vyasaji, no, I think I'll pass. So then Vedavyasa suggests that, well, then in that case, I'll have Sanjaya give you a running commentary of everything that is going on. So Dhritarashtra agrees to that because he knows Sanjaya will be fair on both sides and will give him a very unbiased view of what is going on. But you can see in the shloka how this aspect of the ego comes into play. The very first thing he asks here is Mamakaha, that is my sons, my people. And then he says the sons of Pandu. As you know, in the story of Mahabharata, all the cousins were together and they, grew up together, and Dhritarashtra was very well aware of it. But his attachment, his loyalty to his own children comes first here. So that itself is now the first step where, as you see, the attachment to his children already is shown in this here, on how that creates a division, and that also leads to future, as we can see what happens to the war itself. Another point to look in here is the word dharma, the way dharma is shown here. In here, dharma is shown as the responsibility or duty or of the kshatriyas, which is to fight. That is their duty. But dharma has a much, much more deeper meaning. And the reason why we have to be aware of this is we are looking at it at a plane of higher than we as our finite selves are. So in that connection, how would we interpret dharma? So dharma is not just righteousness or duty or responsibility, is not just responsibility or duty. It is something which is independent of time and place or anything. Because as we all know, our duties and responsibilities can change with time, can change with place, can change with projects, can change in different ways. But dharma, essentially, the best explanation that I've seen for this one is what it is that which basically is the law of being, the law of what it is inherent. For example, the dharma of sugar is always sweetness. It can be in a cake, it can be in a payasam, it can be in something else, but it's never going to lose its inherent quality. So too a fire, for example. The quality of fire is only to burn. So too, the quality of a human being is really to protect. That's the dharma. So that's the dharma that is actually is what Vedanta wants us to understand. So dharma kshetre. So how is the dharma of the people being seen here? And this is an interesting thing that we will see in the 3rd chapter and beyond, how the word dharma is really taken even further. In chapter 4, there are some beautiful shlokas, and we will look at that as well. Another thing to remember to look at the shloka here is the start of Bhagavad Gita starts with the word dharma. And then the very last shloka ends with the word mama. So in and through whole of Bhagavad Gita, we come to understand truly what is my dharma, what is my dharma which is independent of everything, and how do I interpret the dharma based on the situation I'm in. So this is another beautiful thing that we will study throughout Bhagavad Gita, which is Mama Dharma. So the takeaways from this one shloka here is attachment leads to blindness, creating division, the mamakaha pandavaschaiva, and also the sense of an ego, which is born again because of the attachment. So two key things. Dhritarashtra clearly had a greater love for his children. And so in any action, we have to see, how do I remove my own so-called attachment? It's not that we cannot love. In fact, love is the ultimate theme of Vedanta. But what we see, what we exhibit is the attachment. And attachment, as we defined, is I and I want. If that equation is taken out, then we can see how that transforms into love and a universal love. So moving on to the second shloka. So from here on, we will see that Sanjaya now takes over. And for the rest, 700 shlokas, what you see is his report of what is going on in the Kurukshetra. So we'll chant this one. Sanjaya uvacha drishtva tu pandavanikam drishtva tu pandavanikam vyudham duryodhanastada vyudham duryodhanastada acharyamupasangamya raja vachanamabravit drishtva tu pandavanikam vyudham duryodhanastada acharyamupasangamya raja vachanamabravit. So Sanjaya said, uvacha drishtva tu pandavanikam, drishtva, having seen the Pandavanikam, the army of Pandava, vyudham duryodhanas tada. And also in battle array, in the whole battle, then Duryodhana, then tada acharyam upasangamya. Acharya, his teacher, upasangamya, approached, and the king, vachanam abravit. The king then spoke the following words. Again, looking at the shloka itself, looks pretty harmless, looks okay. Duryodhana went, he saw the army, and he goes to his teacher, and then he spoke the words, right? As simple as that. But look at it carefully. If you look at it carefully, you see how the words, they literally tell about the attitude in which Duryodhana approached his teacher. Drishtva tu Pandava Nikam. Okay. So he saw first the army of the Pandavas. Only after seeing that, he then approaches his teacher. And how did he approach his teacher? He approached his teacher as a Raja, as a king. And not only did he approach his teacher as a king, but he approached him and said the words in a very kingly manner, with a lot of power, with a lot of rajas. So, what is that saying? Well, first of all, he his mind was so agitated. He was very restless. He wanted to see really how his competition was. Doesn't that sound familiar? Um, Especially in sports, right? In sports, when you're going to be playing against a different team, you want to know how is each one of those players? What is the weakness of those players? And how am I going to handle them? You want to know everything about the team. So that's what Duryodhana did here. He first saw the army, okay, and after seeing the army, only then he goes to this great teacher, Acharya. Who is that Acharya? The Acharya is Drona. Drona, who has taught the Kauravas and the Pandavas from when they were little in the art of warfare. So it behoves Duryodhana to first go to his teacher, bow down to him, get his blessings, and then ask his teacher how he should be approaching his army, this army. How is he going to, really, what are the strategies? What is he going to do that or anything? That's what you would think needs to happen here. But no, he actually wanted to see how the army was. So that clearly showed that sense of an ego within himself. There is also a sense of really not, even though he was such a great warrior, and we're talking about how big their army was, even though he was such a great warrior, they had such a well organized, much, much bigger army than Pandavas, yet he wanted to check them out. So therefore, this is a very telling sign to show how he approached. And this, in Sanskrit, this is the beauty of Sanskrit. Sometimes you can see he could have just said it was Raja Abravit. That is, Raja spoke. No, Raja Vachanam Abravit. That is, the king spoke with a very kingly voice. Duryodhana has completely forgotten that he's speaking to a teacher. He has shown, in this case, quite a few things. And this is really the theme that comes out from this shloka. In his mind, he was obviously confused. Because if he was not confused, he would have done the thing what was rightfully needed to be done, which is approaching his teacher first. So there was a loss of discrimination. He was not able to think clearly already. And we know that in the story, in this Mahabharata, that he was trying his level best to take the Pandavas out of everything whatever they were entitled to. So that had not left him, and it was with that kind of a state of mind that he was approaching things. So what does this mean to us? How do we look at this? This is clearly a thing on we need to also look into ourselves when we approach a certain action or a certain, whatever it is, whether it's a project, whether it is taking care of something in my house, whether it is the many different things that we get involved with. What is the state of mind in which we approach our plan of action? Am I really calm? Is there something that I'm looking to satisfy my ego, which is only for myself? Am I being grateful for the opportunities that come to me? And am I being respectful to the people who have created an opportunity for me? Or am I respectful with the people whom I'm working with? So all these things really reflects the way we conduct our action. So to me, this is what comes out in this shloka, which is the mind has to be calm and the mind has to be totally not confused when dealing with something. So let's go to the third shloka now. Now we see that was Sanjaya announcing how Duryodhana was approaching his teacher. What does he say in the shloka to his Acharya Drona? Duryodhana uvacha pashyaitan panduputranam pashyaitam panduputranam acharya mahatim chamum acharya mahatim chamum vyudham drupadaputrena vyudham drupadaputrena tava shishyena dhimata tava shishyena dhimata pashyaitan panduputranam acharya mahatim chamum vyudham drupadaputrena tava shishyena dhimata. So Duryodhana says these words to his teacher. Pashya, see all these belonging to the sons of Pandu. Pashyetam Pandu Putranam. This army, which is made up of the sons of Pandu. Pandu Putra, which is sons. Pandu Putranam. O Acharya. Mahatim Chamum. O Acharya, look, these army of Pandus, the sons of Pandu, they are so mahati, they are so mighty. Okay. And then Vyudham Drupada Putrena. And then what about the commander-in-chief? The commander-in-chief Drupada Putra, Drupada's son, Tava Shishyena Dhimata, who is none other than your disciple. And not only that, your wise disciple. Tava Shishyena Dhimata, who's such a wise disciple. Do you see something coming out here? Doesn't that sound a little kind of taunting? And that too to an Acharya, to his own teacher. You know, he says again, Pashya, look. Again, here is an Acharya who has taught him the warfare and who is now there in one of the big commanding positions for the army. And to him, he says, look. He starts with the word look. Pashyetam Panduputranam. And then also referring to Drupada's son, who is his own another disciple. So for all these disciples, he's almost trying to say, you are the one who taught them. And now look, they are on the opposite side. And almost as if Duryodhana is afraid. He sees that even though the Pandava army is much smaller, and by the way, the army size was almost, while Kaurava's army had this 11 Akshavahinis, and the Pandava side had only about 7 of them. So they were, just slightly over, half of, like 7 versus 11. That's how the size of the armies were in terms of the ratios. So, and he knew that their army wasn't that big. But the fact that the Pandavas were also trained by the Acharya, and also Drupada's son, who is also leading the army, they were also trained by Drona, brings a certain amount of, again, of fear in Duryodhana. And he's almost trying to taunt him by saying that, look, you did so much for Drupada, because there's a story about in Mahabharata on how Drupada and Drona were really close buddies at one time. They were so close that Drupada, when he was young, promised Drona that later on he would actually give half of his kingdom to Drona. And when Drona was just coming up, he was actually quite poor. And he was so poor that he could not even give milk, provide milk for his own son Ashwatthama. In fact, his wife used to mix some wheat flour in water and then give it to the child and say, this is milk. And this is how Ashwatthama used to think that he's drinking milk. And so then Drona actually goes to Drupada and says, what about that half of kingdom that you promised me? Can I have that now? Drupada refuses. He says, I don't think I did. I promised you. But if I do have to give you something, well, I can make sure that I provide enough milk for your child. Make sure that I do that. So then Drona walks away, but then he still trains Drupada's son. And so this is what Duryodhana is referring to here, saying, Tava Shishyena Dhimata. Now what happened? Look. So you see, this is another aspect which you see coming out here. And so the shloka number 3, the theme here is not only just loss of respect and reverence, but in addition, by looking at this mighty army and looking at this, of Pandus and looking at Drupada, Duryodhana, brings out a lot of his suppressed emotions in the form of this taunt to his own teacher, Drona. So moving on to the next thing, what did he say? What did Duryodhana tell Drona? Atra shura maheshwasaha, atra shura maheshwasaha, Bhimarjuna samayudhi, Bhimarjuna samayudhi, Yuyudhano viratascha, Yuyudhano viratascha, Drupadascha maharataha, Drupadascha maharataha, Atra shura maheshwasaha, Bhimarjuna samayudhi, Yuyudhano viratascha, Drupadascha maharataha. So in this verse, Duryodhana is trying to point out to his teacher Acharya Drona about how not only is the Pandu's sons' army are mighty, but just like Arjuna, Bhima Arjuna Sama Yudhi. So just like Bhima and Arjuna, Sama, equal to them in battle, Yudhi, there are other, Atra, Shura, Maheshwasaha. So Shura, heroes, and Maheshwasa, that is great archers. And who are they? They are Yuyudhana, Virata, and of course Drupada, the great chariot warrior. So here, this actually goes with 2 other shlokas. We will see both of them and then we will discuss the summary of it. So he continues with the other warriors who are also equally good as Arjuna and Bhima. And they are Drishtaketushchekitanaha Kashira Drishtaketushchekitanaha Drishtaketushchekitanaha Kashirajascha Viryavan Kashirajascha Viryavan Purujit Kunti Bhojascha Purujit Kunti Bhojascha Shaibhyascha Narapungavaha Shaibhyascha Narapungavaha Drishtaketushchekitanaha Kashirajascha Viryavan Purujit Kunti Bhojascha Shaibhyascha Narapungavaha. So these are the, there's one more shloka coming up. Continuing again. Yudha Manyuscha Vikrantaha Yudha Manyuscha Vikrantaha Uttamaujascha Viryavan Uttamaujascha Viryavan Saubhadro Draupadeyascha Saubhadro Draupadeyascha Sarva eva maharathaha Sarva eva maharathaha Yudha manyuscha vikrantaha Uttamaujascha viryavan Saubhadro Draupadeyascha Sarva eva maharathaha. So in total, about 17 warriors are mentioned here, all of them having great powers. Yudha Manyuscha, who has amazing powers, he destroys enemies totally. And then there is Uttamauja, Saubhadra, and Draupadi's sons. So Draupadi had 5 sons from each one of the Pandavas. So they are the Draupadeyascha. Then Saubhadra, which is Subhadra, who is Lord Krishna's sister, who is married to Arjuna. And so her son, her son. And then we had each one of them had, they were all great Maharathas. Each one of them capable of fighting a large number of people at any point in time. And in total, the 17 warriors, each of them were in charge of a battalion consisting of about 11,000 archers. And all of them were made up this formidable army of the Pandavas. So Duryodhana mentions, he takes literally about 3 or 4 shlokas here, verses, to explain about all the warriors in the Pandava side. And you can see he is not even mentioned about his first. He is mentioned more about the competition, again indicating how much he was afraid. He recognizes the mighty of them, even though that Pandava kingdom was not big, but nevertheless, that was something that bothered him. So this truly indicates how, in spite of being so good on being a great warrior, he was very insecure. He was almost worried whether he's going to win the war. Just you can see the attitude in these shlokas. There was a doubt which was being created. And finally, you can see that even though the Kaurava army was so big, much, much bigger than the Pandavas, but clearly, even to him, he recognized that the mightiness of all these warriors, the quality of these warriors, definitely spoke a lot about how good these warriors were. And as we know, the mighty warriors, the Pandavas, represented the divine qualities. So they were focused and they understood what the true dharma was. Whereas in the case of Kauravas, their dharma was more on how they can get things for themselves, not really in the whole scheme of winning the war in the right manner. So this is the Pandava side so far. We'll do one more shloka to finish the Kaurava army, and we will stop at that point. So now he talks about his own army, the Kaurava army, his own. Asmakam tu vishishtaye. Asmakam tu vishishtaye. Tani bodhatvijottama. Tani bodhatvijottama. Nayaka mama sainyasya. Nayaka mama sainyasya. Sanyartham tan bravimite. Sanyartham tan bravimite. Asmakam tu vishishtaye. Tani bodhatvijottama. Nayaka mama sainyasya. Sanyartham tan bravimite. So now he is talking about his army. And how does he say that? Asmakam, among us, tu vishishtaye. We also have the distinguished people among us. And so, O Dvijottama, he addresses Dronacharya as Dvijottama. Okay. Now, let me tell you about the people on our side, as if Dronacharya would not have known it, right? But Duryodhana, you can see his ego coming here to say that, okay, I have to tell you about our army too. Nayaka mama sainyasya. Mama sainyasya indicating army. My army, Nayaka mama sainyasya. Sanyartham tan bravimite. I will now name them for your information. So again, you can see how much of an ego that is coming out in this shloka here. Now, let's look at this word Dvijottama. Why does he call him Dvijottama? He could have continued with Acharya, correct? Well, again, the whole point here is he's trying to bring a little bit of a taunt to Dronacharya. He is not showing the respect and reverence here. Dvijottama is a term that is used to denote a Brahmin. A Brahmin, in the sense, Dvijottama means twice born. Dvijottama. So, what is it about the twice born, right? So the first birth is when a person is born out of the mother's womb. That's the first birth. The second birth is when the person has done enough amount of discipline and enough amount of tapas and has risen to a level where the person is so wise. And that is Dvijottama. So here he is trying to taunt Dronacharya by saying that, oh, you're a Brahmin. What do you know about fighting? So, in other words, he's trying to say that amount of sattva that Drona has, which he has built out of doing the tapas and everything, is not going to help in this battle. And perhaps that is why he also refers to, if you remember in Shloka 3, where he talks about the Pandu's sons. In other words, he's trying to show that maybe that is why you have a soft corner for Pandu's sons, right? So that word is again telling very much about how he is trying to insult the teacher. So the theme that is coming out in this shloka is, first of all, the confusion in his mind due to which he's insulting his own teacher, leading to a lot of loss of respect and reverence, and this aspect of the ahankara, mama, my armies. So we have seen now a whole description of the army, and in and through these descriptions, what is coming out is in the problem statement that we said, which is the attachment, which Dhritarashtra has shown so far, and then Duryodhana, his attachment to his own self, his own ego, which creates a confusion, and how he's even viewing the battle in front of him. And viewing the battle, he's attributing certain aspects, which he's superimposing his own fears and delusion on what is there, and is unable to even recognize the leadership in his own army with Drona. So we will stop here, and our next lecture will be next Wednesday. And if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to send me. And if anybody needs a copy of these slides, I've created a drive, a Google Drive, and you can send me an email and I will put you on the email list so you will get the updates. You can access the drive anytime. And if you have any questions, like I said, you can approach me. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.